Continue to blame each other for the fatal shooting of Major Arthur Nicholson in East Germany. The latest assault in the verbal battle came today from the official Soviet news agency TASS, which says the Army major was spying when he was shot by a Soviet guard on Sunday. TASS reports the Soviet sentry did not know Nicholson was an American and first fired a warning shot before the shot which killed him. Though expressing regret, TASS blamed Washington for the incident and accused the U.S. of spreading a deliberately false version of Sunday's events, for which TASS says a protest has been lodged with the U.S. State Department. The U.S. Army ambulance brought the body of Major Nicholson across the Glienicke Bridge yesterday afternoon. A small Army honor guard participated in a short ceremony at the bridge. A larger ceremony took place at Tempelhof Central Airport last night. A telephone call from President Ronald Reagan to the wife of Major Nicholson, Karen, slightly delayed the ceremony. The Berlin Brigade Band, the Berlin Brigade Drill Team, and an honor guard from the 4th and 6th Battalions of the 502nd Infantry participated in the ceremony, attended by approximately 150 people. The 58th Military Airlift Squadron transported the body to Rhein-Main Air Base, where it was met by a similar ceremony. The Associated Press reports a Soviet sentry shot Major Nicholson on what officials described as a legitimate reconnaissance mission near the East German town of Ludwigslust. The Soviet Union accuses the Army major of taking pictures in a restricted area. The Soviets said the guard fired when the officer tried to flee and that other Soviet soldiers captured his driver, who was at their vehicle nearby. The U.S. State Department called the shooting murder. Assistant Secretary of State Richard Burt said Major Nicholson was several hundred yards outside a restricted area when he was shot. Burt said after the bullet hit him, Major Nicholson cried out helplessly to his driver, Sergeant Jesse Schatz. Soviet soldiers prevented the sergeant from using his first aid kit to help him. Burt said a Soviet medic arrived 30 minutes after the shooting but did not treat the major for another 30 minutes. Major Nicholson is survived by his wife Karen and their daughter, who live in Berlin. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Nicholson, live in West Reading, Connecticut.
I'm Airman Bob Woodley. The body of Major Arthur Nicholson crossed into the Western world over a bridge that has seen the meeting of East and West on a few significant occasions. Once a busy bridge with commuters traveling to and from work in Berlin, the bridge normally stands quiet. It's the Glienicke Bridge, the Freedom Bridge, or Bridge of Unity, linking East Germany to West Berlin. The only people using it today are connected with the Allied military missions in Potsdam, since the border was sealed on August 13, 1961. Other than that, the bridge has been used only for official exchanges between East and West. Perhaps the best known was the exchange of Soviet spy Rudolf Abel for American U-2 pilot Francis Gary Powers in 1962, proving that Soviet rumors that Powers was dead were untrue. Over 15 years later, another significant event took place on the Bridge of Unity. Discovered in Berlin were the remains of several Soviet soldiers who were killed during World War II. The skeletons were found in the British sector of Berlin and were returned to Soviet authorities at the center of the bridge. In the fall of 1984, because of disrepair, the bridge was completely closed by East German authorities for 12 hours. Although the western side had been maintained, Western authorities agreed to pay for the repairs of the eastern half and reopen the bridge to military mission traffic. Unfortunately, the most recent historical use of the bridge was not one of cooperation or goodwill. Over this bridge passed the body of Major Arthur Nicholson, slain by a Soviet guard while working with the U.S. military mission. The Glienicke Bridge, the Freedom Bridge, the Bridge of Unity, names that in the future may once again have meaning. For AFN News, I'm Airman Bob Woodley.
News, Dan Rather reporting. U.S. Army Major Arthur Nicholson, Jr. was 37 years old. The Soviet Union claims Nicholson was caught spying Sunday inside a restricted military area in East Germany. They shot and killed him. The United States says the unarmed officer was doing nothing illegal and was hundreds of yards from any restricted area. Official reaction by both superpowers this evening is mixed in tone. President Reagan said the incident only makes him, and I quote, more anxious to hold a summit with new Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. Bert Quint in West Berlin has our first report on the killing of Major Nicholson.
An American ambulance brought Major Nicholson's body over the Freedom Bridge from East Germany to West Berlin. Once across the border, the body was covered with an American flag. The Russians claim he was a spy, shot while trying to escape after taking pictures of combat equipment in a military area at Ludwigslust, northwest of Berlin. His driver was arrested nearby. The Major's comrades, members of a 14-man military mission attached to Soviet command headquarters in Potsdam, insist he was just doing his job. Technically, that job is liaison between the American and Soviet armies in the two Germanys. The British and French have similar teams, and the Soviets have corresponding groups in West Germany. It's the result of agreements signed after World War II among the four occupying powers. One of the jobs of the liaison teams on both sides of the Brandenburg Gate is to keep an eye on the installations and the troop movements of the potential enemy. The line between observation and spying is a narrow one. The missions are guaranteed the right to travel freely, except in areas where military units are deployed. But they must file itineraries. American sources concede privately that both sides often try to deviate from those itineraries to obtain detailed information not available from high-flying spy satellites. In this case, the Soviets say, Major Nicholson ignored signs warning that he was in a restricted area and was killed by a Soviet sentry after a warning shot. Bert Quint, CBS News, West Berlin.
They're wrong. Dead wrong.
Describing Major Nicholson's movements on a map, Assistant Secretary of State Richard Burt flatly denied that Nicholson was in restricted territory or that he received any warning. Burt charged that Soviet medics did not examine Nicholson until a full hour after he was shot. By then, he was dead, but not before his driver heard him call out, "Jess, I'm shot." Burt used unusually strong language for a diplomat.
That there was completely no justification for the murder of Major Nicholson or for the use of force of any kind.
Soviet diplomats who came to the State Department expressed regret, but maintained that Nicholson was spying, which President Reagan also denied.
This is a tragedy that never should have happened, and he was doing nothing except what we're entitled to do under the agreements.
There seems to be a lack of outrage on your part, sir.
A lack of outrage? No, you can't print what I'm thinking.
In West Reading, Connecticut, Arthur Nicholson's hometown, the flag flew at half-staff this afternoon. Members of the family and neighbors who knew Nicholson were stunned.
He was somebody who had his head on his shoulders. He was quiet. He was tremendous sense of humor. He was just a nice kid.
This is awful. This is terrible. It's a terrible thing. So unnecessary.
Tonight, as his wife and daughter looked on, Arthur Nicholson's body was placed aboard an aircraft in Berlin to begin the trip back home. Despite the strong language, the administration sees this as an isolated incident, which it doesn't want to get in the way of the warming U.S.-Soviet relationship. The president, asked if the shooting could hurt chances of a summit meeting, replied, "It would make me more anxious to go to one." Bill Plant, CBS News, the White House.
Major Nicholson's driver has been released from East Germany. Correspondent Phil Bremen.
Soviet troops raised the Russian flag as usual this morning over their military mission in Frankfurt. Soviet soldiers from this mission rove about West Germany, keeping an eye on American troops, just as the small American mission in East Germany monitors Soviet forces. One of those American observers was Major Arthur Nicholson, shown here on the left at a military funeral in East Germany. His next military funeral will be his own. An honor guard and an army band were waiting when Nicholson's flag-draped casket arrived in Frankfurt late last night. The Army mortuary here has not yet said when the body will be sent on to the United States. The 37-year-old career soldier, schooled in international relations and the Russian language, was shot Sunday by a Soviet soldier. It happened in East Germany, inside a restricted Soviet military zone, according to the Soviet account, outside, according to the United States, where the shooting has been labeled murder. Many U.S. soldiers stationed here are furious.
Yes, it makes me very angry, because obviously there was really no reason.
The best guess is that the killing of Major Nicholson will not seriously increase international tensions, but it has hit home with the GIs stationed here in West Germany. Even the headline in the Army newspaper wears a black armband. Phil Bremen, NBC News, Frankfurt.
Back at 7:17, we've been speaking this morning of the shooting of Major Arthur Nicholson, Jr. at the hands of a Soviet guard. This morning in Geneva, the arms talks between the U.S. and Soviets will resume, and it will be interesting to see what impact that incident will have on those talks. Joining us this morning from Washington is Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs, Richard Burt, and maybe he can tell us what's going to happen in Geneva. Good morning, Mr. Burt.
Good morning, Brian.
Would you think this matter is going to be raised at the table?
No, I don't think we need to raise this matter in the negotiations themselves. We want in the negotiations, of course, to make progress and, if possible, to achieve an agreement. But that does not mean that the matter will not be raised in other discussions elsewhere with the Soviet Union.
Why not at the table? Shouldn't there be a linkage between progress on arms control and Soviet behavior around the world?
Well,
wasn't that a staple of the Reagan administration?
Well, ultimately, Bryant, there is, of course, a linkage. There's a linkage between arms control and the human rights situation within the Soviet Union. There's a linkage between arms control and Soviet behavior in the Third World. But that doesn't mean you necessarily have to raise the issue right at the negotiating table. We have other ways of talking to the Soviet Union. We have diplomatic channels, and we will use those channels to express our concern over this episode.
Do I detect in this an unspoken objective to not let anything spoil the atmosphere of Geneva?
No, I don't think that's correct. We're not interested in atmospherics. We're interested in concrete realities, and what happened yesterday was a reality. But as the President has made very clear yesterday, we are realistic about the Soviet Union, but we are prepared to have a dialogue with the Soviet Union.
The President's reaction has been subdued, hasn't it?
No, I wouldn't say it's been subdued. We think that this is a very serious development. We have already talked to the Soviet Union at a high level. We will continue to speak to the Soviet Union. This major who was shot was working under an agreement that has existed with the Soviet Union for some time. What he was doing was entirely legal. Moreover, as we've made very clear, he was operating in a legal area in East Germany.
An unidentified member of the liaison mission that Major Nicholson was assigned to said that given the nature of the mission, he's surprised this kind of thing hadn't happened before. What are the rules of this, unwritten rules of this game that they were involved in?
Well, there have been incidents in the past. There have been other Western European observers who have been hurt. In fact, a French observer was killed a year ago. Some Soviets, in fact, have been hurt in East Germany. I don't know about unwritten rules. The major was not in a permanently restricted area. He was carrying out his mission. This is a fairly risky business. People recognize it's a risky business. But we think the fact that this major was shot was totally unjustified, and even more important, I think, that after he was shot, he was denied medical care for over an hour, and that, of course, was also totally unjustified.
Can you supply the why for us? I mean, why, if he was doing nothing out of the ordinary in this very acceptable game that they play and we play over there, why did they shoot him?
We can speculate about that, and I prefer not to speculate. We don't know if this Soviet soldier had orders or whether he was just simply being trigger happy. The fact is, though, is that this tragic incident occurred, and we're very unhappy about it.
Are we left to have this matter as just a case of who's telling the truth? Sergeant Jesse Schatz, who was with the major at the time he was shot down, is it just a matter of what he says versus what the Soviets say? Is that all it is?
No, it's not a matter of that at all. In fact, we've already begun discussions with Soviet military authorities. Their maps also show that he was outside of this permanently restricted zone. We shouldn't forget that the Soviet Union has already expressed its regret over this episode, and I think if we put all the evidence, all the information that's available about this episode to the public, it becomes very clear that our version is the correct version.
As a result of this, are there any changes today in the orders of those involved in the liaison mission?
There are no changes. These people are carrying out their mission under the terms of the 1947 agreement.
Undersecretary of State Richard Burr, thank you very much for being with us, Mr. Secretary. One final note. Word is you're to be the next U.S. ambassador to West Germany. When's that going to be official?
I have no comment to make on that, Bryant.
Thank you. Moving up on 22 past, we'll take a break here. This is Today on NBC.
Berlin held a memorial ceremony today for the late Major Arthur Nicholson, Jr. Approximately 400 people packed the American Community Chapel for the 45-minute service.
A steady stream of people, military and civilian, gathered at the small place of worship to honor Major Nicholson and pay respect to his wife Karen and daughter Jenny. Top officials from the French and British forces, the U.S. ambassador to East Germany, USAR Deputy Commander Lieutenant General Thomas Ayres, and Berlin Brigade Commander Brigadier General Thomas Griffin were just a few of the many attending. Chaplain William McAllister presided over the service. In a condolence speech, Colonel Roland LaJoy, chief of the U.S. military liaison mission in Potsdam, where Nicholson worked, reviewed the 3 years Nicholson spent at the mission. He said Nicholson wanted to be out on the cutting edge, and he died doing what was right, working for the security of our nation. LaJoy said he fell in battle, but it was not a fair fight. Nicholson, who was unarmed at the time, was shot Sunday by a Soviet sentry near a Soviet military installation in East Germany, about 100 miles from Berlin and 30 miles from the West German border. Nicholson's body will be flown back to the United States following another ceremony at Rhine-Main Air Force Base this evening. He will be buried at his request in Arlington National Cemetery in Washington. There, the Legion of Merit and the Purple Heart will be presented to Mrs. Nicholson by the Army Chief of Staff. Army Specialist Vinette Rodesky for AFN News.
Officer who was shot to death by a Soviet guard in East Germany is being flown to Washington at this hour. The family of Major Arthur Nicholson accompanied the body from Frankfurt, West Germany this morning. The Pentagon says Nicholson will be buried at Arlington Cemetery tomorrow. Nicholson was shot Sunday near a Soviet military installation 100 miles northwest of Berlin. Soviets say the officer was taking pictures in a restricted area. U.S. officials say the Soviet Union lifted restrictions on that area last month after completing military maneuvers.
The American military community concludes a very strained and emotional week due to the fatal shooting last Sunday of Major Arthur Nicholson, Jr. The U.S. Army paid its final respects to the fallen soldier in a ceremony yesterday at the American Community Chapel. Another memorial ceremony took place on the Rhine-Main Air Base today as the body of Major Nicholson was placed on a C-141 jet for transport back to the United States. He is to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery in Washington, D.C. tomorrow. The wife and daughter of Major Nicholson left Berlin this morning to attend the ceremony and then travel on to the United States as well. Upon their departure, Brigade Commander Brigadier General Thomas Griffin has words of thanks to the American community.
I ask to have a few moments tonight to thank you for what you've done. The last several days have been a time of great sorrow and pain for this community, particularly for the Nicholsons. But it has also been a period of great cohesion. Whether you're an airman or a soldier or a member of our great mission or a family member or a school teacher or whatever, it was obvious to me that you cared and that you wanted to do what you could to show the Nicholsons that and to alleviate their suffering. General Mitchell and Minister Ludke share my great pride in what you've done. And I know that the Nicholson family, Karen and Jennifer, as they travel home, know they go with your love and prayers, and they appreciate what you've done. What I wanted to do for them and for all of us was to say thank you.
The U.S. military liaison mission set up a memorial fund at the request of the widow of Major Nicholson. Stars and Stripes report Staff Sergeant Lawrence Schwab, a spokesman at the mission, said the fund is requested in lieu of flowers. Per Karen Nicholson's desires, the money will be used for the Potsdam House, the official residence of the chief of USMLM in East Germany. Donations to the fund can be made through the American Express Bank here in Berlin.